Now the news in full. President Bola Tinubu has asked leaders and stakeholders in Ogoniland to put behind past grievances so as to support efforts in restoring the environment and remediating polluted lands in their community. President Bola Tinubu made this call as he received leaders and elders from Rivers State to chart a way forward towards the cleanup of Ogoniland. Amadine Uyi reports.
They arrived at the State House in their numbers, leaders of thought from several walks of life in Rivers State. The meeting was chaired by President Bola Tinubu, with several cabinet ministers in attendance, the National Security Advisor, and the Governor of Rivers State, Siminalayi Fubara.
Let me thank Mr. President for bringing us here, and we will be very patient to listen to you and to adhere to your instruction.
The presence of this delegation is a testament to the Ogoni people's readiness to engage constructively in the pursuit of peace, justice, and a sustainable development. Their willingness to participate in this dialogue reflects a shared hope for meaningful progress and enduring solutions.
Let us put the grievances of the past aside. It cannot heal the wounds if we continue to be angry. I know what to do in the memory of our beloved ones so that their sacrifices will not be in vain.
Nigeria's Minister of Environment says that much has been achieved by the current administration, especially in its efforts to restore the environment in Ogoniland, situated in Rivers State through remediation efforts.
This administration has been doing very well because the project has been there for over 5 years. It's with this administration and the commitment of the president that have gone so far. And I can give you some statistics. Number one is that when we came in, only one water project was commissioned. But as I'm talking to you now, 8 have been commissioned. So 7 have been commissioned under the administration of the president, our president, Bola Tinubu. In the area of remediation, what is the most important area we are trying to address, we have done about 36 sites. They have been completed and they have been certified as environmentally conducive for people to continue doing that.
The Minister of Regional Development, however, urged citizens in the area to maintain a conducive atmosphere that will enable development to thrive.
You have to talk about peace before you talk about it. So, like I said, it's only about bringing the peace to the people of Ogoniland. And once the different groups start to operate together, there'll be peace and there'll be resolution of it, and every other thing will follow.
The meeting presents a big leap in the federal government's efforts to ensure the environment in Ogoniland is restored. In Abuja for News Central, I am Amadine Uyi.
Today is day 3 at the ongoing World Economic Forum, and we will be joining a session on the green transition presents an unprecedented economic opportunity, but it is also giving rise to competitive tensions. Now, countries are looking up to protect and also develop domestic industries and export their standards around the world. This session has Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, that's the Director General of World Trade Organization, WTO, David Gills, Managing Correspondent, New York Times, and others. Now let's join the session.
And then they exported this to other parts of the world, so they didn't need to have these emissions, that make the world so much warmer. We could overall, our work has shown, and that of the University of Zurich, you could overall lower global emissions and help us get to net zero by 2050. So I just want to put that framing in for people to think about, a green comparative advantage, as well as the fusion of technology.
I appreciate that very much, and it's a perfect segue to Papua New Guinea. Papua New Guinea, Your Excellency, is a vulnerable nation, of course. You're feeling the effects of climate change already, but also a nation that is incredibly rich in natural resources, both forests, carbon sinks, but also critical minerals, fossil fuels. How are you thinking about the balance between taking advantage of the natural resources that you have, looking for ways to export them, while also preserving your own natural environment?
Well, thank you, David. I firstly want to support Dr. Ewela's statement. Trade and environmental management can coexist. We have no choice but to find a platform in which we coexist. It took thousands of years for us to reach 1 billion people in the 1800s. It took just 1 century for us to reach 2 billion by 1900s. By the time we arrived in the 2000, we were 6 million people. Just in 2 decades, we now 8 billion people.
Well, that is the World Economic Forum 2025. We will also try to reconnect with them. But moving on, in the news, to security matters, residents of Awka, the capital of Anambra State, southeast Nigeria, are asking the state government to step up its efforts in tackling insecurity in the state. In the face of threats to their daily lives and businesses, they want a new security architecture to help them to stem cases of insecurity across the state. News Central's Chinwe Ogele has details.
From Onitsha, the business hub, to Awka, the capital of the state, the story of insecurity is the same. The people are not at peace in their own environment because of the threat of attack by men of the underworld. The people say whatever the government does, security of lives and property must be made a priority.
He's not doing anything concerning security. A lot of people are dying, a lot of kidnappers are killing people, selling their powers, asking for ransom and all kind of things. So I'm not happy about that security situation in Anambra State.
They therefore prefer advice on how to tackle the menace of insecurity.
We should also reach out to people for even more an advanced and broader tactics towards this. If you like, in the Ministry of Homeland, there should be a department in charge of native intelligence gathering, that will DSS.
The recent enactment of a new Anambra State vigilante law and the empowering of the security outfit to fight crimes in the state is only a testament to the level of insecurity in the state.
Anambra is not 100% good in terms of security. If you look at it, there's a lot of kidnapping. People are scared of going out in the night.
Commissioner for Information Dr. Law Mefo says with the new arrangement, insecurity will soon be a thing of the past in the state.
Criminal activities that come under the watch of Operation Odogachi will certainly be treated differently. I don't speak for the police, but the governor is determined that this must succeed. And between now and next 3 months, there must be very clear pathway showing that Anambra is returning to its former glory, the safest state in Nigeria.
Fighting insecurity in a 21st century community should go beyond the use of arms and ammunition. The people and experts believe that the government should deploy the use of technological means in fighting insecurity in a state that has challenges like Anambra. In Awka for News Central, I am Chinwe Ugele.
It seems like a vision that is very at odds with this aspiration for more global trade. You talked about preserving Earth in its natural state. And I wonder if just a brief follow-up, what does that actually look like in a country like PNG? Does preserving Earth in its natural state mean you finding ways to grow your economy, maybe find monetary value for the preservation of your forests, rather than having to, for example, cut those forests down and export that timber? On a practical level, how do you do this at PNG?
Well, my government charged 72% tax on loggers, and I almost got my head chopped because my constituent wanted logging, because it's the forest is owned by indigenous tribes. They say we need roads, we need schools, we need hospitals. And so the world out there needs to see forest resources, biodiversity, marine resources are global assets that is kept in different parts of our society, mostly in pockets of indigenous society. Resources needs to be mobilized so that these resources are preserved, so that the entire planet and the children of this planet into the future benefits from. I spoke at the United Nations before. I said the oxygen my tree produces, we all breathe. Oxygen is the #1 need. Then comes food. So we just need to find a fine balance, try absolute best, and not think from your own country's perspective. All of us need to mobilize resources from a global perspective, and places where forest still remains, let's.
The climate transition is also redefining global trades, redefining global supply chain. This reorganizing is creating so much opportunities, particularly for developing countries. It's going to be a path to a new prosperity. For instance, if you see for next decades, global oil trading routes is going to be redefined. We probably can see place like Morocco could be original place for green ammonia. Place like Brazil could be a center for sustainable aviation oil. And you also can see the green steel trading is going to developing. So Australia probably is going to be the export for iron ore. They could leverage the abundant renewable energy, produce hydrogen, then creating sponge iron and even green steel. And you already have seen China is exporting EV and battery at competitive cost. This competitive cost is enabling so much country can produce renewable energy below the cost of fossil fuel. Also have this EV at lower cost than fossil car. So we see this climate transition is bringing significant impact on the global trading routes. And also this new addition is going to create new prosperity for so many developing countries.
And do you believe that this will continue even with what we're seeing as potential new headwinds from the tariffs to the carbon border adjustment mechanisms? There is this moment of sort of ratcheting up some tension, additional protections at certain borders. You believe that the dynamic you just described is strong enough to withstand some of those new roadblocks?
Sure, I think the train has left the station to a right direction. And the economics, fundamental economics of renewables is there. You see the green electrons has already showed its competitiveness. 85% new installation for electricity in last year is from renewables. So I believe, so economics is the most important measurement and also driver. So, and with the technology development, we see the advantage of renewables and the relative green technology is actually promising.
Thank you, Zheng. Ministers of Rule, Malaysia is a fast-growing, dynamic economy, also faces some of the same challenges that Papua New Guinea is experiencing. It's a vulnerable nation. It has abundant natural resources, and I imagine you're also trying to balance the preservation of those natural resources with the imperative to take full advantage of them. How do you make sure that as you think about growing as an economy, integrating more deeply into the global economy, you do so in a way that's just and equitable, that gives you every advantage that other nations have enjoyed, but also takes care to, as the Prime Minister said, preserve the world in its natural state?
Thank you. Well, if you look at Malaysia, and if you look at ASEAN, I mean, this year Malaysia, we take the leadership as the chairman of ASEAN. We're very much a group of economies that promotes trade, right? We promote trade in the belief that it brings prosperity. But at the same time, we are at different stage of development, even within as a group, let alone in a global framework. So for example, in ASEAN, we have 10 economies. One economy, GDP per capita is at $2,000. The other one at $90,000. So it's obviously when you speak within ASEAN about trade, and when you talk about certain sustainability standards to be met to get access to markets, there will be countries who are not at that stage yet. That's why we talk about just and equitable. We all have the same vision. We want to reach there. I mean, if you look at countries within ASEAN or even other countries in the world, they all have their own net zero target. But how do we get there, right? There will be, even within countries like Malaysia, we have large multinationals, we have large Malaysian companies, but we also have SMEs, smallholders of plantations, etc. And they will need support. The big company will say, yeah, I'm ready, let's sign. You know, we've just started to negotiate again our Malaysia-EU FTA, for example, but the smallholders are concerned because do they get support in terms of funding? Do they get support in terms of capacity building? The answer is yes, they will, but is it adequate? So again, just and equitable means everyone has to play we need to have a level playing field for everyone. Similarly, for the global trade today, you talk about tariff barriers, but there's also discussion whether some of those sustainability standards have been set. Is it non-tariff barriers? I mean, we can talk about CBAM, we can talk about other things as well, but for us, we need to engage all countries, all players, and not forget, you know, in government, I mean, the Prime Minister is also here, we also need to ensure that politically people understand this, right? Because trade can be a bad word if it's not inclusive, right? So similarly, when it comes to trading with countries, when you have to meet certain sustainability standards, means that we need to ensure that we equip them. But the game, I think everyone's convinced. Well, many countries are convinced, majority of countries are convinced we need to go there. And Malaysia and many other countries in ASEAN are part of the Paris Agreement, for example. But we want to make sure that the pathway, the milestone, may not be the same for all. Maybe for developed countries, for developing countries, for LDCs, you might need to have a different speed, but the same angle.
And you just mentioned the Paris Agreement. I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that our new president pulled out of the Paris Agreement this very week. Does that change the standards? Does that lower the bar, if you will, for other countries?
Well, for Malaysia, we believe in multilateral
those migrants to stay back home.
It is something that
taking
we all
them
live
back to farms
on one
and helping them
on one planet. That's what the Prime Minister mentioned.
produce
So
their own food.
we can't
What
afford.
is
We have
left
to stick to it.
to the young Somali or to the young Haitian to do
everyone
if they cannot
understands
produce
why
anymore in their country, if they have no dignity
we are all
anymore
part of
in their country,
Thank
if
you
they
very
cannot
much.
feed their family
Prime
anymore,
Minister,
what is
I would
left
like
to
to
them
ask you
but to
to
flee?
address the
So
United
it is
States
not that
withdrawal
people
from the
are
Paris Agreement.
just
This is a moment, as you
wanting
just
to
acknowledged,
move.
where we all breathe
It
the
is
same
because they are
oxygen.
being forced
We need to
by
preserve the world
nature
as best
to
we
move-
can in a livable
move to the
habitat
next
world as
city.
best we can in one of the largest economies in the world, pulling back.
It's prudent that the biggest beholder of carbon footprints take greater responsibility. Much of the
Climate
burden is
change,
being borne by
desertification,
those of the least
international
carbon
negotiations.
And there's a moral responsibility on each
Saudi Arabia
global
hosted
leaders
recently the UN
to think from a global
COP16.
perspective instead of from their own
And these
national
issues
interest
were
perspective.
discussed amongst other
This
issues.
planet sinks, all of us
How
sink
do you
together.
see
There's no
the
second
future of the
planet.
world when
And
Mrs.
so it is
Elman
really
says
incumbent on all
we have
leaders
proposed something to
to think
Security
from a
Council
planet
to respond to
perspective
these
than
issues,
from their national
and the
interest
Security
perspective.
Council responded negatively.
When the planet is healthy,
Yet,
you're healthy.
millions of people
This
from
little
around the
finger
world are
has
being
a role to play
affected
in the
by these
entire
issues.
body.
But
If
the
it
response
bleeds, the
that we
entire
have
body
today,
suffers.
including multilateral response,
I was in a
is
meeting
more
earlier this morning
to
with the
take care
Prime
of
Minister of Bhutan,
armed forces
who measures
rather than
his
taking care
country's
of
performance
other
through
additional
happiness
forces that are
index.
killing us and
He's
affecting
made a
human
very
security, world
interesting,
security. So what is your
analogy.
view on
He
how
said,
these issues
the
could
planet
be
is
taken
like the human
care
body.
of by the
Heart, you must have a healthy kidney, you must have a healthy liver, and healthy, entire state of body must be healthy for the body to function. The planet needs to be healthy all over, not just in one space. And I'd like to, I have no place to advise the United States president, but I'd like everyone, global leaders, to think from the planet's upkeep perspective. With evidence have shown, statistics have shown, that we at a tipping point. We almost reaching the threshold of Earth sustainability in as far as human impact is concerned.
Yeah.
The amount of pollution, degradation. If we go this path, we may reach a point where there is no point of no return, and all of us suffer together. And so we all have to take this moral responsibility to preserve this Earth. And so it is not for us to think from our own national perspective, but globally, all leaders should be serious about this issue on preserving the Earth. And you can have a global first-class economy today. You have one life, 80 years on average. You can have 10 houses, but you only live in one house a night. In that house, you have 10 rooms, but you live in one bed a night. What relevant is affluent of your economy, of your own life, if your children cannot enjoy that life in their lifetime? It's completely redundant. So leadership today, including the United States, needs to step back. Evidence compel that we think from a planet perspective instead of parochial national interest perspective.
Thank you for that perspective. Dr. Ngozi, it is a moment, and we are here during a week where there is a lot of uncertainty on the global stage today. From the tariffs that we've already talked about to the withdrawal from Paris. I wonder what your message is right now. And you're laughing because we spoke last night, and I have a preview of what it might be. But I think it's an important message to hear.
Yes. Thank you, David. We did indeed. And I know you want me to repeat that message. But before I do, I actually want to make a point about this, what is seen as the trade-off. And to build on what Zhang said, the trade-off between trade, economic prosperity, and the climate. And we have with us in this room one of the most distinguished economists in the world who has done the work. And Nicholas Stern is here, who did the work on the new climate economy that I think Jean-Lé was sort of underpinning, to show that this trade-off may be a false one. To show that, we do have a new climate economy that is driving new jobs, driving prosperity. And my fear is that there may be leaders who we may not be making that point strongly enough. Let me put it that way. There may be leaders not getting that message. And there may be private sector people also not able to internalize that message. And so it's still leading us to the old paradigm, that there's this. Maybe in the short term, very short term, but look, we need to take, as Prime Minister of PNG, His Excellency keeps saying, we need to take a medium and longer term perspective of the world. And if we do that, we will see that this new climate economy is manifesting. It's creating new jobs, it's creating new economies, it's creating new ways of doing things. And that really, I feel very passionately about that. And I think that, countries who, if you look at countries' NDCs, you will not see, for instance, trade policies that encourage movement towards this new climate economy. At that time, they felt trade was a problem, not the solution. And I want us to you can use tariff policy to actually encourage. If you look at some of countries' tariff, you see contradictions where you have lower tariffs on fossil fuel goods, and on clean energy goods, the tariffs are higher. Can we correct this? At the WTO, we've done a handbook with 10 trade policy measures that you can apply, to help strengthen your path to net zero. So I did want to make that, but how do we speak up more loudly, including the New York Times and everybody, make the point that these trade-offs may be false, and that we have a new way to go. But coming back to the message of, tariffs and the rising protectionism. The rising protectionism is evident. Trade has been facing strong challenges in the past 5 years. But I do want to make the point that trade has been largely resilient. That 80% of world trade, according to our statistics, is still taking place on WTO terms. It used to be 75. We've actually updated the work and seen 80% of world trade is taking place on WTO terms. Now, does that mean that we are complacent or we should be? Absolutely not. Because we see increasing fragmentation of trade, which is very costly. And so you're right. that, this is something that we should be of concern. But we're by the same token saying, the word I said in the session last night is, let us chill. Chill is my word. Let's not get overly excited at every announcement, at every pronouncement. Let's see what his policies actually put in place and not overreact. Certainly from the WTO viewpoint, we are saying to our members, let's also not have knee-jerk reactions. If something is announced, you immediately get up and announce a counter. So it results in tit-for-tat trade war, which will land the globe in a place we don't want to be, because we've lived it before. In the 1930s Smoot-Hawley Act of the United States, which resulted in a trade war that made the Great Depression worse and was really not good for the globe. We've modeled this. And if we continue with fragmentation, let me use that, if we actually go for an all-out tit-for-tat trade war, it will result in double-digit losses for real global GDP in the longer term. It will. That is huge.
Yeah.
So we don't want to. So let's chill for a bit. And this approach is well within what we encourage our members at the WTO to do. So yes, like everyone else, we're expecting to see a raft of tariff announcements. It didn't come, and actually what came is what I'm telling you. We've looked at the executive order. That is sensible in the sense that we encourage our members, if you have a complaint against another member, the first thing is to do some investigations and studies to demonstrate the harm that has been done to your economy. That will dictate the type of remedies, and we do have remedies. And then you can call for consultation so you can actually have a dialogue with those who have done you harm. So we have a methodology at the WTO, and I hope that this promising approach of asking, let's look at this with 3 months deadline, 1st of April, all these studies have to be ready, may lead us down. So that's why I'm saying, let's chill for a moment.
Okay.
And then we'll see whether the temperature gets hotter.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ngozi. Zhenglai, I wonder if you could talk a bit about how Envision has actually taken a different approach. Rather than so many companies centralize their manufacturing perhaps in their home country and use that as an export driver for the national economy, Envision has a different approach. You started localizing production in different regions around the globe. Talk about the benefit there, and it's a slightly different spin when we think about global trade.
Right, so we strongly believe is this transition is a just transition, should be an inclusive transition, should be the opportunity for locals and also for the place with those developing countries with abundant renewable energies. So for instance, as I mentioned, so the climate transition bring the new trades, but the new trades is backed up by the new trading hub. But think again, what's behind the new trading hub is the new industrial ecosystem. This is going to be tremendous new opportunity for those developing countries. So for instance, like PNG, we could imagine they have so much abundant renewable energy like hydro and wind. They also have abundant biogenic carbon. This could be a fantastic place to build a net zero industrial park for sustainable aviation oil and also for green methanol. If you build such a net zero industrial park for green methanol, then it can ship to Singapore because it's a global bunkering center for maritime. So then decarbonize global, maritime trades. So I do see lots of, magic is going to happen because of this transition, lots of opportunity for these developing countries to have the new industrial cluster. So that's why, that's a belief to make it Envision. So we plan early. We pursuing FDI. We also want to help a developing country to create this industrial ecosystem through Net Zero Industrial Park.
Thank you very much. Prime Minister, how's that sound to you? Ready for that park?
Excellent. I have a lot of clean energy options, alternate. PNG right in the face of our Asian century that is coming up. We look forward to contribute to forest resource management, clean energy alternates, managing oceans and sea. Ocean is 70% of the planet. There you find food, you find resource, you have great carbon sink. Our forest is a big carbon sink. I just want to appeal to those out there who want to help.
Okay.
Save planet. PNG is an alternate for you to see.
We just made a deal, and people say nothing happens in Davos.
Thank you.
Can I just say something? This deal fits into the WTO's model of re-globalization. You know, encouraging the decentralization of supply chains, decentralization of manufacturing, to be more inclusive into those areas and regions that didn't get it. So they become more integrated into the world, and we build global resilience. So beautiful.
Yeah. Minister Zafrul, final question for you, and then we may have time for one question or two. A through line of this conversation, even though we haven't said it explicitly, I think has been the tension between the short term and the long term. And in the short term, I think we all understand the benefits of global trade, the benefits of exporting and taking full advantage of a country's natural resources. And yet at the same time, there's the long-term imperative that Prime Minister has articulated, the need to preserve the earth, to preserve those natural resources for future generations. I wonder how, as Minister of Trade, you think about balancing that tension in a country that is growing fast and has such high demands, such high needs, and yet it has its eye on the long term as well.
Yeah. Well, there is a trade-off, obviously. For Malaysia, we also have a big sink, a forest reserve. Our forest reserve is around 54%. And if you look at the development of the various regions in Malaysia or even in ASEAN, there will be an expectation that those who keep this forest reserve needs to be compensated, right? Because politically as well, they will want to make sure that their region also sees the development. So that's number one. So we need to ensure that even in the longer term, when we look at regions that have reserves of maintain the forest reserves, they need to be compensated. And I think countries that do not have that fiscal space may have problems on that. And that's where the carbon trading, the carbon credits must come into play in the longer term. Right now, I guess we need to have the standards, etc. The discussion is happening, and in fact, in Malaysia and in many countries in the region, they're already talking about carbon tax, etc. But again, it's not easy because someone has to pay for this, right? And to pay for this, you need to make sure that we are at the right level of development. I mean, if your GNI per capita is at that level, it's no issue, but many countries do not. We have not reached that level yet. So it's not easy to pass through the costs to consumers and to the people who are obviously not ready. Industries, they are. I think in the longer term, we're already seeing industries playing a role in this. We mentioned about FDI coming to the region. They're all demanding renewable energy. Many companies are RE100 companies, and countries we need to build the infrastructure, and we are already encouraging companies to come in and build those green investments. That's why I think on trade, when you talk about green, the green investment is happening, it's coming. Green investment strategy, many countries have adopted their own green investment strategy to support industries, which will then hopefully cross-subsidize some of that cost to consumers, especially to the vulnerable groups. And finally, I think in the longer term, everyone has to be in agreement that the goal is the same goal, right? Because if 2 or 3 major countries divert away from that goal, right, then it's going to be difficult for the smaller and the middle-sized countries to then achieve what they want to achieve. Because, like what the Prime Minister said, Secretary General said, we all need to be together in this, and we can't afford not to be playing this game as a team.
Thank you, Minister Zafrul. We have time for 1 or 2 questions from the audience. Lord Stern, please.
Thank you.
We'll bring a mic to you, and would you please stand?
Nick Stern, London School of Economics. I wanted to ask a question about investment, because this new economic geography comes about through investment. This matching of narrow economic efficiency and economic efficiency taking the environment into account comes through investment. The growth story, the new growth story, which you've all been describing, is realized through investment. You build the clean before you run down the old. So if you could comment from your different perspectives, what you see as the obstacles around the world to realizing this new investment, which will drive a growth which is much more attractive than the dirty, destructive models of the past.
Thank you. Prime Minister, may we ask you first? I think it's very pertinent. What are the major obstacles towards realizing this vision that we've been articulating in PNG?
Well, the need for immediate capital for development remains a major obstacle, and all leaders, whether you're in a first world country or in a third world country, you face an election, by the way, in the first instance. But election aside, every decision you make considers basic and essential services to your constituent, your people. And that sometimes conflicts with the noble and overall picture that we want. But I always believe if we look in totality, we live in a time in Earth's history where technology is abundant, capital is abundant, and the know-how is abundant also. And if the entire global leadership, not just from one nation perspective, but the entire global leadership sit together, the buck rises and stops with leadership. And all nations come together, leaving aside their own individual parochial interests. I think leaderships can find solutions, and we'll assist her better. And we'll assist everyone better. Because it's government policies from country to country that drives the private sector and drives everything else. So the sum of all this conversation must find its bed in the total global government's public policy outlook. So I think there's a big space for national leaderships and all governments to come together in this sort of forum, possibly United Nations forum, but many times we go to United Nations and we speak from all sorts of perspectives. I think the anti-public policies from all nations should be really in harmony with these sort of conversations.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Minister Zerfo, I wonder if you could also address the question, and I don't know if you could speak to this, but one of the things that I encounter in my reporting so often is the different interest rates and the degree to which developing nations are saddled with much higher interest rates for the kind of climate investments that are needed to realize the vision we've been talking about. Are the reform efforts that we're starting to see at the MDBs making a difference there, or are these, unjust, unequitable perhaps interest rates still a major impediment to some of the growth?
Well, I don't think interest rate is that important when you look at the investments that's coming in, and it depends. If you're borrowing US dollars, you are exposed to the currency as well as the interest rate that's decided in the US. But for markets like Malaysia, where it's deep enough, they can access capital through the local markets, and therefore it's dependent on the local rates. But having said that, I think there are three things which is to answer your question. The first one is the cost. Whatever you say, the cost of renewable energy is still very high, and someone has to bear that cost. Yes, you can fund it, but funding it is also still expensive relative to conventional investments. And then secondly, if you look at investments that's coming in, if you can pass through that cost, it's okay, but it's going to be difficult. Yes, solar, for example, cost has gone down a lot because of economies of scale, etc. But if you look at hydrogen, if you look at even battery cars, battery energy vehicles is still more expensive than ICE. So if that doesn't go down, then it's going to be hard for people to embrace adopting RE in everyday use. Again, it's back to cost. So governments have to play a role, like the Prime Minister said, but if government can play a role, of course they can create the right incentive framework in terms of fiscal and non-fiscal framework, tax, etc. At the same time, we can also give support in terms of grants for industries, especially in logistics, or even industries to embrace circular economy. And we talk about carbon capture, utilization and storage, etc. But again, it just means that someone has to bear that cost. So at the end of the day, it bears back to cost. It's either government or consumers or the industries have to share that cost. And as long as we don't reach that kind of efficiency and productivity, that cost will still be high for renewable energy for everyone to embrace.
Thank you. Dr. Ngozi, final word to you. We have 1 minute. Major obstacles and perhaps how we overcome them. Easy.
Very easy. I think Lord Stern's next question is very pertinent. Just three things very quickly. I think there's still a risk perception in many of the countries where there is need for investment that is out there. and you know, it may be exaggerated, you know, in whether it's PNG or on the African continent where we have these resources, you see such a paucity of investment. So we have to deal with the risk perception and create instruments that governments can do, like guarantees, to try and give the private sector some comfort. There's uncertainty, and uncertainty prevents the private sector from investing. Once there's this belief that we are not sure whether this model or paradigm will endure, and we have backwards and forwards movement on whether climate change, whether the agreement will endure, and then you also have the private sector hesitating sometimes to put the investment dollars or euros into countries. That uncertainty is not good. And three, there's geopolitical fragmentation in investment. The IMF has done some work on this and shown that foreign direct investment is bifurcating, you know, with investors investing in like-minded countries and not going to others, you know, bifurcation of investment flows, and that may not be necessarily where the best investments are. You know, so those are three quick points that I think we need to think about if we are to encourage more investment. Actually, at the WTO, we have an instrument to try and take care of the risk. We are negotiating an investment facilitation for development agreement that will take away some of these risks, not take them away, but mitigate for those countries that sign on, so that investors can see that all the bureaucracy, the licensing, the this, the that in the way of investment is also being cleared away.
Thank you, Dr. Ngozi. Well, I think we've got a pretty comprehensive overview at this of both the scale of the problem. We knew that coming in, but certainly I'm walking away from the panel with a much greater appreciation for the potential and the opportunity that trade, especially with these leaders at the helm, might play in helping address this urgent crisis we all face. Thank you very much to the panelists. Thank you all to the audience.
Thank you. Good to see you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, that was the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum 2025, currently taking place in Davos, Switzerland. You know, it talked about squaring the climate trade circle. That's basically trying to find a balance between climate change and trade. And now we move on to the news. The U.S. President Donald Trump has defended pardoning nearly 1,600 supporters charged over the 2021 U.S. Capitol riot, stating that their lives have been ruined. Speaking at a press conference on his first full day as president, Trump also revealed plans to impose a 10% tariff on Chinese imports, citing concerns over fentanyl trafficking to Mexico and Canada. Now, Trump has further urged businesses to end illegal DEI, that's diversity, equity, and inclusion, discrimination, and preferences. Following the inauguration on Monday, he has signed several executive orders marking a swift start to his presidency. The actions signal Trump's focus on reshaping U.S. trade policy, addressing social initiatives, and providing support to those involved in the Capitol incident as he moves quickly to implement his administration's agenda. And now in business, Portugal plans to boost its liquefied natural gas imports from the United States and Nigeria to lessen dependence on dwindling Russian supplies, according to Environment Minister Maria de Garça Carvalho. Now in 2024, Portugal imported 49,141 gigawatt hours of natural gas, with about 96% of LNG, that's 51% from Nigeria, 40% from the U.S., and roughly 4.4% from Russia. Following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the EU imposed sanctions on Russian oil and gas, though LNG imports by ship remain unaffected. Carvalho stressed the importance of EU cooperation for energy independence and mentioned challenges in achieving price stability due to supply-side inflation. And now in the world of sports, the federal government of Nigeria has allocated 6.5 billion naira for the country's participation in FIFA and CAF competitions in 2025, and this is according to the National Sports Commission's budget proposal. Major events include the African Nations Cup of Men and Women, both hosted by Morocco, alongside other qualification matches. The Super Eagles and Super Falcons have already qualified for their respective tournaments. Youth teams, including the under-17 and under-20 women, will also compete in World Cup qualifiers. Under President Tinubu, the sports budget has risen from 30 billion naira in 2024 to over 94 billion naira in 2025. And that's all at this hour. You can watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV, and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I'm Darshan Usman.